On this Christmas Eve, I'm going to share some thoughts I've entitled Embracing the Wonder of Christmas. The Christmas story highlights one of the great paradoxes of Christianity, and it's simply this: the more humble our state, the greater our chances of experiencing the wonder of God's kingdom. I'm going to repeat that. The more humble our state, the greater our chances of experiencing the wonder of God's kingdom. Jesus is famous for saying, anyone who becomes as humble as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And you can find that in Matthew 18, verse 4. Never was that concept more true than at the time of Jesus' birth. We are used to world leaders saving their most spectacular announcements for summit gatherings of important people. Then, in front of cameras that broadcast to the whole world, important announcements are made. It only makes sense. If you have important news to release, you release it to important people in impressive circumstances. But at Christmas, we celebrate the fact that God chose to make the most incredible announcement this world has ever heard to the most humble people possible in the most humble of settings. When it comes to the players within the Christmas story, the shepherds are the most unlikely participants. King Herod was nasty, but he was still a king, and kings are always important. The wise men, by virtue of what we call them, were important for their wisdom. The shepherds, though, were not considered to be wise or important. Think back to young David before he killed Goliath and before he became king. While his older brothers went to war against the Philistines, he was relegated to caring for sheep. Real men went to war, while those who were less than real men shepherded sheep. And yet, in the Christmas story, it was smelly, humble shepherds. Not kings, not warriors, and not even wise men who got to experience the wonder of Jesus' birth on that first night. Maybe shepherds are perennial favorites in any Christmas pageant because there was nothing special about them. Not only were shepherds humble people, they worked in an ordinary setting far from any palace. Just outside the little town of Bethlehem are what are known as the shepherds' fields. And if you go on a tour to Israel to explore the roots of Christianity, you will probably visit those fields. The tradition that it was in those particular fields that the angels appeared to the shepherds goes all the way back to a time shortly after Jesus' birth. What's amazing about those fields is that they're so ordinary. The shepherds' fields are just hilly, stony pasture land, not unlike what you can see wherever livestock graze. So what is it about humble people and humble circumstances that makes it possible to connect with the wonder of God's kingdom? One characteristic of humble people that was illustrated in the shepherds is that they don't mind interruptions. The shepherds didn't have a pressing schedule that got in the way of being interrupted by a bunch of angels. Like other humble people, they took life as it came without making concrete plans. Far from putting up with the interruption caused by the announcement of the angels, the shepherds welcomed the opportunity to experience something new and wonderful. For many, if not most people, the birth of Jesus was a major political and religious interruption. King Herod certainly didn't welcome the interruption. The religious establishment of the day didn't welcome the interruption, nor did people who enjoyed their long-held-to traditions. Being willing to be interrupted doesn't sound like much, but how often are we ready to drop whatever we're doing to respond to an impromptu opportunity? How often are we willing to give up long-held-to ideas to investigate new concepts? For a lot of us, we need to check our schedules before we accept almost any kind of invitation. But a characteristic of humble people is that they respond well to interruptions. The truth is that God's best work is often done through interruptions. The announcements by the angel Gabriel to Zechariah and to Mary were massive interruptions to both their lives. But look at what those interruptions accomplished. If we take a personal inventory, we can see how it's our reactions to the unexpected interruptions in our lives that has gone a long way to shape who we are. I well remember the time my day was interrupted by an invitation to consider being a pastor in this community of Flin Flon and Creighton, which at that time felt like it was practically a whole planet away. I can truthfully say that my understanding of God's workings has grown in ways I did not anticipate. Faith and I often comment about how this community has been good for our souls. The ability to embrace the wonder of Christmas has a lot to do with being able to welcome interruptions. Most of us experience interruptions. Sometimes it feels like we are inundated with interruptions. Some are welcome, a lot aren't, especially at Christmas. May you be blessed this Christmas with discovering the wonder of Christ's coming within the interruptions of life that come your way.